Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Zenithal priming, or Zenithal highlighting, pre-shading, whatever you'd like to call it. Lots of people use different terms. I know I do interchangeably. I also have started to use the term underpainting. It's not something I've coined. I know that Donna Howell on her YouTube channel uses the term quite a lot, and I'm sure lots of other people have as well. But essentially, what we're trying to do when we go through this process is to prepare your model to take colour other than just through a standard black prime, white prime, or a flat coloured prime. Now, what do we mean by zenithal pre-shading or highlighting? Well, the zenith is the highest point of something. In this instance, we're talking about light, and that generally means highlighting your miniatures from the top down. Though light may not always come from top down, so you can choose to do it from different angles if you'd like to. This is particularly useful for people creating dioramas or sort of showpieces and things like that, and you can see plenty of evidence of this for some really high-end painters over the years, competition painters, where the light is very clearly coming from a certain source area. So for this video I have a selection of different kinds of miniatures that I'll be working on soon, some for my work as a commissioned painter, some for my own personal projects. Now, regular viewers of my painting tutorials will know that I tend to zenithal prime most of my miniatures, and it's something that's becoming more and more important over the years, especially recent years, as I've tended to base coat an awful lot more with glazes, in particular using contrast paints from Citadel and the new Army Painter speed paints. In the most part, these paints are designed to allow some of the colour from underneath the miniature come through and to look darker in the recesses. Now, the way that the manufacturers of these paints advertise these is on a very basic flat colour primes, be that white or cream generally, but I like to enhance the effect they have by adding shadow into the dark areas and light into the higher areas, and I do this with zenithal priming. Now, it's important to note that this process isn't designed just to suit contrast paints and Army Painter speed paints and other such things, though it definitely helps to have a thinner layer of paint going over the miniature that has been pre-highlighted, pre-shaded, underpainted, whatever you'd like to call it. I've been using this process myself for many years, long before contrast paints came to the fore, but contrast paints are very much just pre-made glazes, maybe a slightly difference in formulation, but glazing as a technique and using glazes is definitely not something new, and painters have been doing this for a very long time. I actually first started to use this process on 28mm tanks, mostly for the Horus Heresy, and by doing large pre-shaded areas and then airbrushing afterwards with thin down paint, it meant that I didn't have to do so many layers or colours using the airbrush afterwards, as the pre-shade and pre-highlight would show through the thin layers of paint, giving it a natural highlight and shade. So what do you need to achieve this? In most cases you really need an airbrush, but there are some ways you can get around that slightly, and I'll come back to that later in the video. In this video I'm only using white over a black prime, but you can also use grey as an intermediary colour as well, and I often find that's really useful on larger miniatures. But essentially I'm trying to create a smooth layer, almost always top down on a miniature, at least to start with, to create a slow build up of white paint. And the white goes on the top where the light would land, and it leaves the undercuts of the model and underneath much darker, almost pure black. Now, for some miniatures and some areas of miniatures, I want to make sure that there is enough lighter coloured paint there in order to take certain colours, so I do try to think ahead a little bit about what I'm going to be painting and what sort of colours I'm going to be using. For example, if I'm working on some Napoleonic British infantry and I want their trousers to be white or light grey, I will make sure that the fronts of those miniatures and their white trousers are hit with the paint. The danger is you can over highlight and then the miniatures just look like they've been primed white, and often on camera, and maybe even in this video, some of these miniatures may well look very similar to a white prime miniature, but if you had them in your hands and you could look underneath, you could definitely see where the darker areas are. In most cases, the zenithal prime for the airbrush is all you need. However, working with so many smaller scale miniatures recently, I found that I didn't quite always get enough of the detail picked out to really make the most of the thin layers of paint or contrast or glaze afterwards. So for the smaller miniatures, I started just by giving them a gentle dry brush in white, really picking out those points on the miniature that really catch the light. And this made a huge difference once I applied the paint afterwards, really making the miniature look like it had a mid-tone, a shadow and a highlight. I found you have to be very careful with dry brushing on the larger miniatures. You don't want to hit any of those flat areas because those will also show through the paint. But I've also found that highlighting with a regular paintbrush afterwards in white, so almost painting in a little bit of the detail first, really helps with the process as well. And that's it really. I didn't really want to make this video too long, and no doubt I'll be referring to it an awful lot in my future painting videos and linking it in when I mention Zenithal pre-highlighting or shading or underpainting, and referring people to watch this video first. Watch out for some of the miniatures you've seen being highlighted in this video. They will be appearing in painting tutorials soon. And the images of finished miniatures at the end of this video. Just a few examples of miniatures that have been first of all prepared using Zenithal highlighting and maybe even underpainting as well. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that some of you have found this useful in one way or another. I know I mention a lot of my videos, but I'm also aware that I don't always explain it in great detail, or I spend too long explaining it, and I wished I had a video to refer people to, which I now have. If you are new to the channel, please do check out the other videos, consider subscribing and like the video if you have enjoyed it. Thanks very much, and I'll catch you soon.